Hello and welcome everyone to this webinar on the publication of SBP Standards version 2.1. My name is Lucas Rieck, SBP's Operations Manager, and I will be your moderator today. Before I hand over to our speakers, I would like to cover a few housekeeping items. So as you have noticed, microphone and videos as well as the chat function for participants have been switched off. However, we very much invite you to submit your questions via the Q&A function you can find on top of your screen under Q&A. And please also post these questions as the presentations go on. We have a little team moderating the questions in the back, and we will try our best to address all of them as we go on. I would also like to inform you that a recording of this webinar, as well as the slides and a Q&A document, will be made available next week. For this webinar, we will be hearing 3 presentations, and at the end of the webinar, there will be time to address the questions that we have received via the Q&A function. I'm very happy that I'm being joined by 3 of my colleagues from the SBP Secretariat today, who will all share a brief presentation covering different aspects of version 2.1 of the standards. Our first speaker will be Carsten Julius, SBP's Chief Executive Officer, who will be talking about the standards as keystone of SBP's action. The next presentation by Nicholas Viard, SBP's Technical Director, will cover the journey that ultimately led us to version 2.1 of the standards. And last but not least, we're being joined by Alex Orban, SBP's Standards Manager, who will walk you through the changes that are coming with version 2.1. So without further ado, I would like to hand over to Carsten Julius, SBP's CEO, for the first presentation. Carsten, over to you.
Thank you, Lucas. Good afternoon from the center of Europe, and good morning to everyone who is further west of us. Thank you for joining us today. Yesterday marks the formal publication of SBP's Standards version 2.1, and I want to briefly explain why this update matters, what has changed, not in detail, I'll leave that to the team to explain, and probably also just as importantly, what has not changed and what the intentions were around this. SBP continues to operate in a fast-evolving policy and market environment. Our role as Sustainable Biomass Program is to provide a credible, robust and auditable certification framework that works for you as as certificate holders, as well as for regulators and wider stakeholders alike. Now, the version 2.1 is a targeted refinement of the version 2.0 standards. And my short presentation now will walk you through the rationale behind it and the principles that guided this update. Next slide, please. Now, over the last few years, and those of you that know and have been following SBP, you will know this SBP certification has grown significantly, and we are seeing uptake in new geographies, specifically in Southeast Asia and in Japan. We're expanding the system use across existing and emerging markets with currently a very specific focus on agri, or we call them non-woody feedstocks, and interest from new sectors like sustainable aviation fuels, biochar, biocarbon, lime industry, steel industry, and so on. This growth is reflected not only in our certificate numbers, but also in the diversity of use cases and regulatory contexts in which SBP is applied. At the same time, regulation has evolved rapidly. The implementation of EU RED III specifically, and the publication of the EUDR, which is not part of our standards, but these are good examples of how sustainability expectations and assurance requirements continue to develop. Now, against this backdrop, it's essential that SBP maintains a certification system that is not only credible, but also practical, auditable, and fit for purpose. Our standards must work in the real world, in your world of audits and supply chains, and this is why clarity, consistency, auditability are absolutely critical and why we periodically need to review and fine-tune how the standards are written and applied. Next slide, please. Now, why update the SBP standards? SBP published its standards version 2.0 in May 23, and that version 2.0 was fully enforced then in November 2025. And following that publication, certificate holders, you guys, certification bodies, implemented the standards in practice. And if we wanted it or not, we created a live all-in field test, more or less. And as expected with many major revisions, this real-world application generated valuable feedback on what worked well and where challenges emerged. The Secretariat systematically then captured this feedback over time and reviewed it in detail, drawing on operational experience from audits, certification decisions, and risk assessments going forward. And based on this evidence, it became clear that some targeted updates were needed, not to change the intent of the standards, not at all, but to improve operational usability, internal consistency, and clarity for auditors and EU certificate holders. So with board approval in the background and fully aligned, obviously, with the objectives and focus areas of SBP's overall strategy that you can see on the right side illustrated on the slide, we therefore launched the revision process that has now resulted in the standard version 2.1. Next slide, please. Standard version 2.1 is best described as an improvement release rather than a change in direction. It's based on structured feedback that we have received from EU certificate holders, from certification bodies, but also from regional risk assessment working bodies, as well as based on regulatory developments since the initial launch in 2023 of the 2.0, and most notably, of course, recent changes in EU RED 3. So the focus of 2.1 is on clarifying existing requirements, resolving inconsistencies or ambiguous wording, and addressing practical challenges identified throughout the audits. Where relevant, of course, the standards have also been better aligned with the RED 3 requirements, but without introducing any kind of new sustainability concepts or thresholds. That was never the intention. Importantly, there's no change to the intent of the standards, and there is no weakening or watering down of any sustainability requirements. In short, the version 2.1 is about making the system clearer, more consistent, and better to audit, while fully preserving the robustness and credibility of SBP certification. And that's why our key message today from us to you is quite simple. This is not about changing the standards, but it's about making them better. So please keep this in the back of your head, in the back of your mind, when I now pass back to Lucas for the other presentations. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Carsten. For our next presentation, we will be looking at the journey that ultimately took us to version 2.1 of the standards. And for this presentation, I would like to hand over to my colleague, Nicholas Viard, SBP's Technical Director. Nicholas, over to you.
Thank you very much, Luca. Thank you, Carsten, and good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. So yes, indeed, I will speak about the various steps that we've taken from the start of the process of revising the standard 2.0 toward 2.1 and how it has been framed. Next slide, please. So the revision process is framed by the SBP standard development procedures, which is available transparently on our website. It sets the various steps, role and responsibility in the development and revision of our standards. In addition to those mandated steps that are well captured in that document, we, the SBP team, have developed a number of tools that enable and facilitate the implementation of that process, but as well the communication between the various governance bodies involved into the revision. When we revise the standard 2.0, we have started and use information, as we mentioned, from various sources, including all the comments that we've received from users of the standard 2.0 since its implementation in 2023, the views, but as well the input from our governance bodies, the working bodies who work on the regional risk assessment, but as well the work done by and received during the public consultation. Next. So over the SBP, work with 4 governing bodies that have been involved in the revision in their different capacity. So the Secretariat, us, the team of SBP, and the staff, we have drafted and did the writing of the updated standards. The technical review was then made by the technical expert on the technical committee, who could, when they did that revision in discussion with us, propose and some changes to the draft. Then the draft were communicated to the standard committee, who is made of 6 representatives from the civil society and 6 representatives from the commercial sector, who have reviewed as well, discussed, made input, and ultimately, by consensus, approved the content of the standard. Finally, the board received the package of the revised standard, and on receiving the assurance that due process has been followed and that the content of the draft standard has been approved and validated by the standard committee, the board has finally endorsed the standard for their publication. Next. So the public consultation was really an important element for us to put the draft standard to the users of the standard and receive those feedback to see if the draft were in good direction and how we could as well fine-tune the proposal of the changes that were made. He has been very fruitful in bringing a good number of comments, as you can see, 145 comments, especially directly from the users of the standard. The biomass producers and the auditors and end users are the main participants to this revision, to this fine-tuning. We see on the right-hand side that the glossary has received most of the comment, as well as standard 2. And for the glossary is not that surprising because it's the element that and the document that has received the most of the changes. Next slide. So the changes and the update made to the standard had 4 elements and objectives: to clearly align with EU RED 3 in concept and in wording, to strengthen the feedstock sustainability safeguards through improved clarity of the requirements and definitions for consistent implementation and auditing, but as well improve auditor rigor and data discipline. We can see on the graph that the main changes we can say is with the glossary. You can see we have put a lot of effort to develop the dictionary of term, of SBP term, so that all the concepts and the element content into the standard have a very clear and precise definition that everyone can refer to. We can as well that standard 2 and standard 3 are received a subsequent number of updates and clarity and clarification. But as Carsten has rightly highlighted, the overall SBP system remains unchanged. Next. And finally, so the journey has taken a little less than a year. It was focused and streamlined and quite concentrated. We had a lot of exchange, as you can see on that graph, between the different governing bodies with some back and forth and the public consultation that ran between December and January of 25-26. And the Secretariat, so the SBP staff, has really concentrated the effort to make and to deliver standard version 2.0 with the support of our governing bodies. The standards were published yesterday on our website, and in the coming months, we will add more supporting documents, including the update to the regional risk assessment, and therefore, organization will be able to start certifying against version 2.1 from July 26, and will have 50 months to transition. So it means for a company that you will use your normal audit cycle within that time frame to update toward version 2.1 with no additional audit required for that transition. So on this highlight of the journey that we've taken, I will hand over back to Lucas for the rest of the presentation.
Thank you very much, Nicholas. Yeah, and for our third presentation, which will look at the changes that are coming with version 2.1, I would like to hand over to my colleague Alex Orban, SBP Standards Manager. And one comment from my end, please feel free to already ask your questions. The Q&A function is available right now, so there's no need to wait until the end. This will give us a chance to already review your questions. Alex, over to you.
Thank you, Lucas. I will continue with what exactly has been published as part of v2.1. This slide gives you an overview of what is included in v2.1 package, documents that are already available and those that are currently being updated. All our core standards, instruction documents, glossary, normative interpretations, Q&As have been published, together with supporting documents, the overview of changes, and SBP responses to stakeholder comments. Regional risk assessment, guidance documents, benchmarking, evaluation for FSC, PFC, training materials are being updated and will follow. The training videos will be made publicly available. On the right, you can see that SBP website has been updated and v2.1 has its own dedicated section. Easy to find v2.1 specific documents in each subsections of the website. To identify the changes, each document now includes a new section G. Section G works as a roadmap for users showing exactly what changed from v2.0 to v2.1 and why, making it easy to navigate the updates. We hope it will help users to quickly locate the updates without rereading the full standard. And the comments column explains why the changes was made. The overview of changes, it's a non-normative document published as supporting document, which is a new document category for SBP. Visually compares v2.0 with 2.1 using color coding, making new and revised indicators easy to spot. This document is non-normative, making it a navigation and support tool, no additional requirement. We hope you will find it useful when you need to quick orientation before diving in the full standard. Basically, you can immediately see where changes happened. To support transparency, we also published another set of supporting documents showing how stakeholder comments were addressed and why and what changes resulted. It is a structured table that links stakeholder comments directly to SBP responses. In gray, you can see columns with the stakeholder comments, SBP response, and the resulting actions taken. Now, in the next slides, I will highlight what has changed in the standards document, providing a high-level picture of the key changes. We start with Standard 1, which is now more clearly aligned with EU requirements. No-go areas are explicitly defined, and expectations for key forest practices like clear-cut size and deadwood retentions are clearer. In practice, you should review the sourcing, ensure evidence is available where needed. And please note that now EUDR is now explicitly referenced as applicable legislation under Indicator 113, and it is applicable when biomass is supplied to Europe. In Standard 2, as a general update was made to clarify the 3 risk management options: regional risk assessment, company risk assessment, or certification. Therefore, we have introduced CRA, company risk assessment, to clarify when risk assessment is prepared by the organization. Terminology has been aligned, like SBE versus CRA, and requirements are clearer for SBP controlled claim when controlled material is used as an input. Please check more details in the table from section 3.2. And if you rely on certification, FSC, PFC, SFI, you will need to record certificate details. The standard 3 updates focus on consistency and proportionality. GHG audits now require ISO 14065 accreditation, but auditor requirements are more flexible in low risk or certified residues only cases. Processes around peer reviews, non-conformances, timelines, certification validity are clearer. In Standard 4, mass balance rules are now fully aligned with RED 3. Claims rules are clearer and more flexible, and we have introduced key elements like details EU RED claims and trademark use, which are now mandatory. Users should review the mass balance period, claims, and trademark use. In Standard 5, some SAR indicators have been moved to Instruction Document 5E. There are clear details timelines that applies now, and cells without SBP claim must be recorded now as sold as non-certified. The key message for Standard 5 is timely and accurate data management. In Standard 6, there are no requirement level changes. The standard remains unchanged for now. The glossary has been significantly updated. It was one of our main objectives to provide better definitions. New and revised definitions improve clarity, align terminology with RED 3, and we really hope it will increase clarity of the requirements. To give you concrete examples from the glossary updates, for example, in the area of land use and biodiversity, terminologies has been aligned with RED 3. This makes it easy to distinguish between different forest types like primary forest, old-growth forest, naturally regenerated forest, semi-natural forest, plantation forest, and planted forest. Or another example for feedstock and data management, terminologies has also been clarified to improve sourcing description and details reporting. This include clearer definitions like sourcing area, supply base, product group, product type, material status, and origin, helping to ensure consistent use across the system. ID1A, requirements for trees outside the forest, is now aligned with the Standard 1 v2.1 indicators, meaning that we have three new and 4 revised indicators. Therefore, certificate holders should check applicability and ensure the TOF activities are assessed against the updated indicators. In ID5E, most changes reflect previously published interpretations. However, some examples, product type naming is clearer, and feedstock definitions now clearly distinguish residues with stumps and roots from those without. Users should check classification of feedstock categorization. And to recap the key dates, v2.1 is published now, becomes effective in July 2026, and the transition period ends in October 2027. Finally, on the SBP website, to recap, v2.1 has its own dedicated sections. All published v2.1 documents are clearly grouped and easy to access. As you can see here, under the normative documents, we have the SBP standards, we have the supporting documents, the overview changes and stakeholder comments. The same we have for instruction documents, for normative interpretations, for Q&A. And documents which are under revision are the regional risk assessments, the guidance documents, and the benchmarking evaluation for FSC and PFC. And this slide brings us to the end of the presentation, and probably now we can take over the questions for the Q&A session.
Thank you very much, Alex. Yes, we have indeed already received some questions, and for the Q&A session, I would like to hand over to Nicholas. Nicholas, what's the first question we have?
Yeah, the first question is directed to me, so it will be easy to answer. I'll be happy to take it if I can repeat the part about the timelines and whether or not additional audit is needed. And indeed not, the additional audit is not needed. We give 50 months transition period to ensure that companies have the time to prepare. They update it against version 2.1, and when the next audit is coming up is to coming with the ready for 2.1 certification. So between July and October 2027, we have more than a year, meaning everybody will go through their audit cycle. You don't need to put forward those audits, just wait for your normal audit to make as long as it's between that window of July and 29th of July 2026 and 28th of October 2027. So that was my first question. The second one will transition to version 2.1. I suppose when the biomass producers go and update their system toward version 2.1, does it then require a stakeholder consultation? Alex or Roman?
Yes, I can take this one. So stakeholder consultation, it is required in our standards, standard 1, standard 2, standard 4. So it is not directly connected with transitioning to v2.0 to v2.1. But because probably all of our certificate holders will need to revise the supply-based evaluation, that will imply a stakeholder consultation. If you update risk assessment, mitigation measures, if you have your company risk assessment, you will need to update with the new and revised indicators. Those activities are requiring a new stakeholder consultation. So to understand or to have the answer for this question, you just need to follow the standard requirements for stakeholder consultation, and please consider what you need to update based on v2.1 revision.
Thank you, Alex. Next question is around chain of custody, trading, and the DTS. And we ask if biomass sold by a producer or a trader need all to be submitted in the DTS when, for example, not sold as SBP certified. Alex or Roman? So when we say
I'm checking again the
question.
question. So biomass sold by a producer or trader. So supposing is SBP certified,
I
needs
suppose
all
so.
to be submitted in DTS when not SBP.
As not sold as SBP certified or to a non-certified client.
Yes, that is a role in the DTS guidance, which is now a normative indicator and we subject to audit. So when you sell certified biomass as non-certified, it is recorded in DTS, sold as non-certified.
Yes, thank you. The next question is about, so thank you for the webinars. And do you have plans to update the regional risk assessment? If so, when? So Alex, yes, you can speak about the hard work you are currently ongoing with our working bodies.
Exactly, we have already started. Our plan is to release the updated regional risk assessments by July 29, which is the effective date of the v2.1. We are in time right now. The draft version of the risk assessments are already prepared. So during June, we will have the public consultation for those because we have new indicators, revised indicators. And of course, this process is not fully under our control because we are working with local experts. We have the public consultation and we don't know today the level of feedback from stakeholders. But if we follow our project planning, we should be ready by 29th of July. And today I'm confident that we will be ready.
So there will be part of the number of documents that will be updated and published on the website from between now and July, so that everything is ready. So I invite everyone to, if you haven't yet, to register to the newsletter as well as the scheme document updates mailing list, which is directly from our website. So you'll make sure that you will receive those updates directly in your inbox when they are made available. And as well, encourage everyone who is active in region where there is a regional risk assessment to participate to the public consultation and to follow when they will be made available.
And Nicola, I would like to mention also the benchmarking evaluation because they are also quite relevant, connected with the regional risk assessment. So we will publish those as well. So companies which are working based on the regional risk assessment, they will have the result of the risk evaluation. But those companies which are preparing the company risk assessment will need to use the new benchmarking results to see what they need to assess and what is covered by our benchmark. So those two documents will go together.
Thank you very much. So don't hesitate to put your comments and your question in the Q&A.
There are a couple of questions more in review.
Yes. So the first one is about, so do we consider the move and the change to version 2.1 as a scope change? So yeah, I think in my, I don't know if you want to answer.
So basically, certificate holder will need to get a new certificate, which will mention v2.1, but the system is not prepared to request a scope change audit. As you mentioned, we have 15 months of transition. So this transition for v2.1 should happen during the next annual audit. And the intention is to update the certificate status from v2.0 to v2.1. So it is a scope change in the certificate itself, but it will not require a scope change audit. It will be included in the annual audit.
Thank you. And Alex, can you clarify the link with the coming implementation of EUDR?
Yes, we have an indicator in Standard 1 which speaks about legal compliance, which was covering EUTR. Now it is including EUDR. So what is the impact is that we are assessing and checking the EUDR legal compliance. So all data elements from the EUDR which speaks about legality will be covered by our risk assessments, where we show specified risk. It will be mentioned which category of legal requirements are not complied, and those would be checked by auditors. Guidance will be provided, or details will be provided in the guidance document for Standard 1. And to make it clear, we don't audit our EUDR module. We don't audit traceability reporting geolocations. So our focus will be in the spirit of our indicator, legal compliance for EUDR. And in the EUDR regulation, there are clear differentiated legal compliance requirements.
Thank you. And can you speak about, the question is about, is SBP planning to develop a benchmark of SBP Standard 1 with the new FSC risk framework? And more widely, can you speak about the benchmarking status after the revision of version 2.1 against FSC and as well PEFC?
Yes, so we are engaged to update our benchmark for FSC and PFC. Of course, we will consider the latest versions from FSC and PFC, and we will consider our new and revised indicators for SBP Standard 1. So in July, we will have a new benchmark. That's why I mentioned it's also important, besides the regional risk assessments, which will highlight which indicators will be covered by those two schemes. And that will also trigger what indicators needs or doesn't need to be assessed by certificate holders who needs to prepare a company risk assessment.
Thank you very much. And Roman, maybe you can answer to that one. Is biomass sold to non-certified buyer or client and recorded as such in the DTS as sold as to a non-certified buyer still considered as having an SBP claim when evidence of SBP compliance is supplied to the buyer?
Yes, this kind of non-certified buyer will not have access to our DTS system. So in that case, the SBP certified trader will need to provide an extract from the DTS. There's a possibility to share the transaction. However, of course, we wouldn't call it as our system anymore. I mean, but material is still considered as SBP compliant. Yeah.
Thank you very much. And the last question so far is more a design question. If we could replace the gray letter with black letter to improve readability of the documents. So that's something we'll take on with our designers to make sure we cater for all the readings. Yes, and make it easy.
It was kind of very dark gray, but apparently it's not black. So yeah.
Thank you for that feedback. I also noticed when working for hours on PDF documents, indeed, it can create some challenges. I agree with the feedback, yes.
Thank you very much. So if you have any other questions, don't hesitate to write them in the Q&A session. Yes. It will be easier to handle.
Yes, and since we see a raised hand there, we are unfortunately not able to take questions directly from you, but if you can submit them to the Q&A, that would be great.
In the meantime, yeah, to remind this, yes, keep track of the update of SBP. We'll be following up that webinar with a number of information sent that we are going to send next week, including the slides and the link to the recording, if you want to listen again or share with your colleagues and team members who are working with SBP. And throughout, so the 3 upcoming months, we have a number of publication up and coming. And as we will roll out as well training in person in various regions, we will bring version 2.1 to the users for our next in-person meetings and be ready for that. So yes, I think if we haven't any more question, please.
Yes.
I think, yeah, Lucas.
Thank you very much. We have one last question that is more comment that this webinar was helpful. This is something we always like to hear. So positive feedback or feedback of any kind is always welcome. As Nicholas said, we will be sharing more information and a recap of this webinar as well as a Q&A document and the recording next week via email and via the SBP website. So please stay tuned and thank you for joining us today. And yeah, I wish you a great day, great evening, wherever you are. And thank you for tuning in. Goodbye.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alex. And with this, I would like to hand over to Nicholas for the Q&A session. So Nicholas, what questions have we been receiving so far?
Thank you very much, everyone, and thank you, Alex, for presenting the changes. We have so far received 2 questions. The first one about the cutoff date and the transition period. So what is the cutoff date for obligation to use version 2.1? And if an annual audit happens in June 2026, can we still use version 2.0? Alex, do you want to answer or Roman?
Yes, I can take it. So the standards are going to be effective from July. So you can audit or request an audit on 2.1 starting from 29th of July. We have a transition period for 15 months, and that was specially designed to cover the 12 months of the annual audits. So it gives you the full flexibility to decide whether you would like this year or next year to do the transition for 2.1. There can be specific questions. If we have the audit in before July, you cannot have any audit on 2.1. But after July, by the end of the year, you can decide if you are ready to switch to 2.1 or you will do it next year. Our intention is not to involve an additional audit for this transition. So the best approach is to align the v2.1 updates with your next upcoming audit, which is the best for you.
Thank you. And follow up on that, there is as well a question around the transition required for the certification bodies. So what is the date when the certification body have to have updated their procedures?
The certification bodies needs to update the accreditation. The information was already shared by us with the involved parties. It should be a smooth update. It will happen remote. So in the best case scenarios, certification bodies should be prepared with the new accreditation in July or after summer holiday, because to issue the new certificate on 2.1, they need to have the upgraded accreditation. We don't have a deadline for certification bodies, but it should happen fast and smooth, as it's not a total new reaccreditation. It is just an update to the actual accreditation. So from the experience, it can happen in 3 months or a little bit later. So it should not be very long time.
Thank you. There is as well a question around some elements you reported for changes into the standards for the biomass producers using only residues. Now, the connection was not very good for the person, so he wonders if you could reclarify what changes has happened to the standard specifically for the use of only residues, if there has been any changes made to the standard.
Regarding the residues, has been made different changes in different standards. We have improved the mass balance reporting timeframe for different scenarios. Probably what I mentioned, it is the auditor qualification flexibility, which now is simplified for processing residues when they are certified. So we tried to differentiate the forest expertise from the chain of custody expertise. So we have some feedstock categories in case of certification, in case of post-consumer, in case of certified residues where you don't need to check the origin. So chain of custody auditors could cover easily the SBP requirements. So the biggest change is in standard 3 regarding the auditor qualifications, and other standards have some adaptations for residues to align with RED 3 and with our general approach.
Thank you. Another one with regard to the definitions. So the definition of old growth in primary forest in red, those definitions differ to the member states or to local legislation. Can you explain a little how that works into our system?
Yes, in our glossary, we have now many new definitions. All of them are needed to interpret our requirements. There are technical definitions like old growth forest, primary forest, and not only like peatland and others. And they are fully aligned with EU policy level requirements. And where we found that options to adapt the definition at local level, it is mentioned in our glossary. So for example, the primary forest or old growth forest, if you read our definition, at the end of the definition, we say that when local definition is available, that should be applied. And this is coming from the regulation, which says the same. So we are fully aware that some forest level technical definitions cannot be globalized. And that's why in the definition in our glossary, you will find for some terminologies the statement that local definition should apply.
Okay, thank you very much. There is a question around the proof of sustainability required. So for the do we need so how can we demonstrate proof of sustainability? When is it available? Maybe Roman, do you want to speak about the POS?
Yeah, so at the moment, the POS can only be used for traders who are trading non-SBP RED compliant biomass. So if they buy from the scheme like Shore, for example, and they want to trade it, then we have an obligation from the EU to allow that. And for that, they would obtain POS from their supplier. Then for this purpose, we are providing POS format. However, we also learned that there could be some interest among SBP certified producers to, alongside STAR, DTS, and all our own tools, to be able to also provide the POS for some customers. We are currently looking into that. designing the system, trying to connect it to our SAR to see how it would work together with our greenhouse gas calculator. So currently we can't tell you the date, but we are looking into that, into making this available.
Thank you, Roman. Alex, can you please explain a bit more the link between v2.1 and EUDR?
Yes, so in standard one, we have a specific indicator which is about compliance with applicable legislation. In v2.0, it was the UTR. Now we have revised to incorporate EUDR as well. But please consider that the indicator says applicable regulations or legislation. So if you are not sourcing to Europe, that is not applicable. So we need to differentiate for standard one, for that specific indicator, we need to differentiate between biomass producers, what is the applicable regulation or legislation. We are going to provide the revised risk assessments, which will incorporate EUDR level assessment. If it will have a specified risk, again, you need to mitigate only if sourcing in Europe, because only in that case it is applicable.
Thank you very much. There is maybe a clarification on the use of the benchmarking and recognition framework. How is it used? When is it used? And the condition to use it. I think that will address some of the questions. Yeah.
So now we have very good revised indicators in different standards explaining how to use the benchmark certification schemes like FSC, PSC, or SFI. I will not go in details because there are many scenarios. One update that we have now in standard says that if you are sourcing only certified feedstock, and there is no regional risk assessment, you can prepare the company risk assessment only for the gap indicators, which are not covered by the benchmark. Another practice is that we are using the benchmarked indicators like a mitigation measure. And for 2.1, we are revising or updating our benchmarks to include the revised indicators and to publish a new benchmark, and probably the schemes also have a new version of the standards. So how to use the benchmark, it's a big topic. Very briefly to summarize, it's about using it as a mitigation, using it as a feedstock compliant if it's processing residue, or using it to decide what company risk assessment to prepare for the gap indicators.
Thank you. There is a question around the preparation of the audit. Do we have to do an internal audit in accordance with the standard, with the new standard before the external audit?
Requirement for internal audits has not been changed. It is the same. So we should follow the indicator. You should have an internal audit before the surveillance audit will take place. So the requirement is the same. We don't have extra requirements.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry. Again, if we go back to the EUDR, what is it? Yes, is there alignment between the new glossary update aligned with EUDR definition, especially for the terms of forest and related terms?
Yes. Basically, there is also some alignment between EUDR and the RED3, and our glossary, it is aligned with EUDR and RED3. Yes.
Okay. And one, if we go to the DTS, yes, 30 days for accepting the requirement. Do we know what's happened if the receiver is not accepting the transaction in 30 days? What happened to that transaction?
From what I know, it will be flagged in the DTS transactions list, and probably it will require a double check during the audit.
Yes.
If I can ask, like nothing, we will not kind of withdraw the transaction, it will be a violation of the requirement. So the action will actually come from the certification body during the audit. They will see the list of those kind of violations, and then they may raise a non-conformance if justified.
And Roman, because you're online, I think you're the one who will be able to answer that next question. What's happened with the training? Will you provide an online training package for the updated version?
I wanted also to mention that in relation to the question on the benchmarking. So we are currently in the final stage of updating our training materials. They will be live on our Talent LMS kind of portal for auditors, and then also YouTube, I think next week. So what also happened in this review is it wasn't just an update to 2.1, but we also updated materials because they were slightly outdated from the last recording in 2023. And we will be having several slides on benchmarking with more details. So please follow our updates. If you see that we have published it on YouTube, you should go and watch the webinar or module on Standard 2, and there will be more details on benchmarking, explaining like how is it used and what are the kind of flexibilities. Everything what Alex mentioned already, and with some additional details.
Thank you. And then maybe, yes, last one, conscious of time, will be about, yes, the again, back to the EUDR. Do we have guidance on how the auditors are going to look at this specific component into the audit for this indicator that mentions 1.1, that mention EUDR?
Yes, the guidance will be included in the revised guidance document for Standard 1. However, we need to remind our risk-based approach that we are releasing risk assessment for many regions now. We have 14 in total. Based on the result, if it's a low risk, there is no need to extra verification because we released the supply-based verifiers, the evidence concluding a low risk for EUDR. If it will be highlighted as a specified risk, it will be mentioned on which area, because in the guidance we already have prepared those elements from EUDR which needs to be covered by a risk assessment. So details will be provided by the regional risk assessment. Probably the guidance for that indicator will be more useful when the company is preparing the risk assessment, like company risk assessment, and auditor needs to check what was assessed for EUDR compliance. But the details will be included in the guidance document for Standard 1.
Thank you very much. And on this, I will hand over back to Lucas.
All right. Thank you very much, Nicholas. Thank you to all our speakers, and thank you to the audience for all the questions. I hope we managed to cover most of them. However, I would like to remind you, we will also share a recording of this webinar, and we will share a Q&A document with the questions we have received after this. And as a final point before we close, please be reminded that we will also be offering a second session of this webinar later today at 4 p.m. Central European Time. And with that, I would like to thank you all and close this webinar. Thank you for coming.